So principle number one, this is just review real quick, but principle number one was have a clear vision of your desired outcome. And we talked about how important it is to have a vision or know what an A performance looks like. It's also important to have goals, but to keep in mind that goals are important, but without vision, goals go unmet. So it's more important to have a vision than it is just a bunch of goals. Oftentimes we'll have goals set up with no vision at the end of it. And so we lose the reason why we're doing it and stop with our goals. Counting the cost, understanding what it's going to take to reach the finish line. That's part of having a clear vision. And then also just the commitment, embracing the standard without accepting a lesser version. So it's all about having a clear vision of the desired outcome and focusing on that outcome and not just effort, that type of thing. So, and then we talked about principle two was plan first and produce second. And of course, there's a lot of application in our red book setup. Our red book is entirely set up to really implement this principle, the plan first, produce second. And it's really planning your entire shift or day before you produce anything. And then planning requires patience. It means to be patient with the process, go through the process and avoid jumping ahead and using the plan as you go. A lot of people don't like to use the red book. They like to just go in and just start doing stuff instead of taking their time and making sure that they go through the planning process and do all their counts and all their planning up front. When we do plan first and produce second, it gives us confidence. When we know what the future looks like, it helps us to be clear-minded, and our anxiety goes down when we know what's already going to happen. And that can only happen if we plan. Anticipation, when we plan first, it helps us to think through options, probabilities, and anticipate problems before they can happen. Planning first and producing second also requires navigation, working backwards from your vision, reverse engineering, so to speak, knowing where you're going to go, to, and what's going to happen. That's part of planning. And so this is just kind of a quick review. So principle number one and principle number two. And today we're going to talk about principle number three, which is benchmarking. And so benchmarking has a specific definition in our company, and that's not so much different than kind of what you would imagine just with benchmarking. But really what it is it's setting progressive finish lines or time goals. It can be time goals, it can be accomplishment goals, it can be setting these benchmarks in however you need to set them. But it's really about splitting it up into different sections so it's easier to hit. So the purpose of benchmarking is to maintain focus on attainable bite-sized chunks of time to ensure a series of mini victories that increase our overall pace. It does require that we start with the end in mind and reverse engineer it. And it also challenges our natural normal pace of action, and it creates a new, faster normal that our brains can adjust to. But it really doesn't, our brains aren't going to adjust to it unless we have some kind of benchmarking in place. Think of it like benchmarking also works kind of like braces with teeth. If you've got really crooked teeth, to get them straight, you put braces on there, and just a little bit of pressure over time, you make progress over time. And benchmarking is kind of like that. It's measuring, making sure that you're on the right trajectory to hit the goal that you want by a certain time. So we'll break it down today. We'll look at setting a finish line, compartmentalization, measuring results, and then discipline. So with that, we're going to jump right in. So, all right. So setting your finish line. So when it comes to setting finish lines, that means, having a proactive, hard deadline, or begin with the end in mind. So a finish line is something that gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a goal, something that you want to accomplish. And so your finish line becomes your anchor of focus. So think about if you're running a marathon, that finish line, that 26.3 miles or whatever, that finish line, that's what you want to focus on. That's your goal. That's what you're going towards. And without a finish line, you become easily distracted. Now imagine you're going to run a marathon, but you don't know where your finish line is. You're just going to start running. Well, that's great if you've got a GPS and it can tell you when you get to your 26 miles, but what if you end up at the wrong place, right? So it gives us something to focus on to get us to where we need to go. And so in our work, if we look at it from a daily perspective, we might make our finish line 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We want to have all of our prep done, all of everything done and locked and loaded, ready to go at 3 o'clock, or maybe on a slower day, maybe it's 4 o'clock. But either way, you start with the finish line. You know when you have to have this done. On our big weekends or our big holidays, like Halloween coming up, or Valentine's Day, we look at this a lot different, but we focus on our finish lines. We'll usually say like 10 o'clock in the morning on the day of that big day is our finish line. So we want to have everything done before that. But it does require it requires hard deadlines, but it also requires that we pay attention to those hard deadlines and we go up above and beyond those. So I want to talk about the difference between hard deadlines and soft deadlines. Okay. So a hard deadline is the absolute latest moment you can have something done. Procrastinators rely on hard deadlines because hard deadlines are the only thing that procrastinators see. They wait to the last minute until until you don't have any choice, where the pain becomes so real that you have to just get after it and get it done. Maybe you wait till the day before to file your taxes, or maybe you wait the day before, before you go buy the things that you need for a birthday party, or maybe you wait just to the last minute before you start prepping something that you need. Whatever it is, hard deadlines are those natural deadlines that come up that you don't control. They're typically externally controlled. Soft deadlines are a little bit different. It's soft deadlines would be like when you tell yourself, okay, I really need to have this all done by Wednesday because I know I'm going to need it on Friday. Okay. When you need it on Friday, that's the hard deadline. When you'd like to have it done to make your week ideal, or so that it fits in with all the plans ideally and doesn't interrupt with anything else, that's a soft deadline. It's putting things in the right place. The problem with soft deadlines is if you're not a disciplined person, soft deadlines are no deadlines. We just like bust right through them and we ignore them and we just go straightforward, distracted, doing our own thing until the hard deadline makes things really difficult for us. And it puts us in a position where we have to do it. And even then, sometimes it's too late and then we fail because we blasted through our deadlines. And that's why it's really important for us on a daily basis to have that deadline. So we're focused on 3 o'clock. I'm just going to use 3 o'clock as the example, because that's a typical deadline that we want to have everything done for a day. But if you focus on that and you focus on that, what you're going to do is you're going to start off the day productive, and you're going to be working fast because you want to get done ahead of 3 o'clock. You want to get done by 2 o'clock if you can, or 1 o'clock. So you want to do all your work up front and be able to relax closer to the deadline. That's what we want to do. That's ideally when we think right, that's how we think. The problem comes when we want to take our time up front and wait till the last minute and then kick it into gear. Then we run out of time. And so we need to be able to not rely on hard deadlines as much as we do. We need to be trusting the soft deadlines and have the discipline enough to do those, to get it done early because we know we need to in order to avoid the problem. It's like people that will leave early to go someplace when they know the traffic is going to be busy. They'll plan ahead of time. They'll plan around the traffic and they'll leave plenty early so they can get there ahead of time and avoid the problems. That would be somebody that's good with soft deadlines. They didn't have to leave at that time, but they knew that by leaving at that time, they can get there sooner and that kind of thing. So this is all related also to internal motivation versus external motivation. External motivation is a consequence. It's something that happens outside of yourself, that happens to you. It's a motivation. So if I'm late to something, then there's a consequence to that. Everybody looks at me as I'm walking in the room and wonders why I'm 30 minutes late and why I can't get my crap together, right? And so there's a motivation. There's a consequence that comes from not being prepared for something. You're procrastinating and waiting for those external motivations and to kick in and force you to do something. Internal motivations are different. They don't rely on external forces to do the right thing. They're just going to go do the right thing and do it ahead of time because they're internally motivated. And if you think from the cradle to the grave, as we go through life, we're all going to be externally motivated when we're kids. We're not going to pick up our toys until our parents tell us to pick up our toys, and we're not going to uh, take care of getting our homework done on time and getting it done every single night when we're in grade school, unless the parents are going to help with that, help remind and help get things going and keep us on track, provide those guardrails. But as we get older and we get into high school and then particularly to college, we learn to have internal motivation. We have our own self guardrails that kind of help us get to where we need to go. And so we're able to hit our finish lines on our own because we're internally motivated. We're not just hitting the finish lines because other people are using sticks or carrots to manipulate us to do it. We shouldn't need to be bribed in order to hit our finish lines. We shouldn't need to be threatened or have negative consequences to hit our finish lines. We should be able to be internally motivated, internally driven to accomplish things. And that's kind of that's a sign of adulthood. That's a sign of mature thinking when we can drive ourselves, and it's part of self-leadership, self-management. And to go right along with that too would be being results driven versus effort driven. There's a difference between somebody that says, I'm going to do this, and the results are more important than anything. It's not about effort. And then the other person might be saying, I'm going to try, I'll do my best, but I can't promise I'm going to do it. And so the efforts are only as great as the commitment. And so people that are good at benchmarking, they and finish lines are ones that are focused on the finish line, and they're committed to that, and they're committed to the results that come from setting finish lines. They're committed to that. People that are more effort driven, they're like, well, I'll try, but whatever I don't get done, I don't get done. And they don't accomplish things. They're the ones that are running into rushes behind time after time and day after day, because we're waiting to the last minute to get after things. And we're not trying to push our efforts forward and have our efforts come first and the consequences second. We're waiting too long, and we're focusing on just trying is good enough as opposed to results. So, that's setting your finish line. So the second part here is compartmentalize the task. Okay. So once you've set your finish line at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's your finish line. Then it's about compartmentalizing the task. So breaking it down into bite-sized chunks of time. So in our company, of course, in our red book, we break this down too. So if you come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're going through the red book, compartmentalization would look like having an idea of what you're going to have done by 9:30. And there's some benchmarks that's pretty standard, that'll be pretty close, good goals to try to hit whichever store you're in. And then there's others just going to be different. It might be different every day depending on what kind of tasks you have or who's working with you or whatever. But it's about sitting down and planning it every day and compartmentalizing, knowing what you want to hit. So for instance, 9:30 I think is a common benchmarking timeline that we put in place to try to have all of your admin duties done, counting the drawers and doing your inventory and figuring out your prep lists and all of that, and kind of having that in place. So 9:30, maybe that's one of the compartments that you've created to work within. And so the whole idea is that you want to work at whatever speed you need to work at and be as diligent as you need to get that done by 9:30. And if you get that done by 9:30, then you're on task. Then you're on track to hit your finish line later on. So the next thing would be, what do you want to have done by 11:30? So maybe between or maybe 11 by the time you open. Maybe you want to have all of your add-on sales and your sheeting done by 11, or maybe you want to have all your add-ons done by 11 and maybe all of your sheeting done by 12. And so you put those tasks in there so that you know where you're at. It's kind of like when you're running a marathon. If you have mile markers along the road that tells you how far you've gone, and you've got a watch, you can actually figure out if you're on pace. If you want to run, 8-minute miles, then you can simply just look at your watch, divide the number of miles, and figure out if you're on pace, if you're going to actually arrive at the finish line at the time that you're planning. And so by having these benchmarks, these little mile markers along the way, it can tell us whether we're on target. So maybe having a 9:30, maybe having an 11 o'clock benchmark, maybe a 1 o'clock benchmark, and then maybe a 3 o'clock benchmark. Maybe you divide it into 4 sections, or maybe 5 sections, whatever you think. But the whole idea is to break it down into bite-sized chunks, and make it attainable that way. So one thing that compartmentalization does is it squeezes out unproductive time. See, if you've got to get something done by 9:30, you don't have time to waste an extra 10 minutes that normally, if you didn't have any goals, you think, it's not a big deal, I can just make it up later. I can just kick it in. I'll get things done. I've seen a lot of people start off not working very quickly at the very beginning, and time just gets away from them. And before they know it, they've got no time left and a whole bunch of things to get done, just simply because they just lost track of time, and they didn't pay attention, and they didn't move at that speed. So it squeezes out unproductive time, and it provides boundaries to your actions, so that you keep moving, you keep busy, you don't take a whole bunch of breaks, or go take a smoke break every 30 minutes or whatever. It keeps you going, so you prioritize, and you prioritize hitting your benchmarks. So that's pretty important. And it also, compartmentalization also really helps give you reassurance. It helps you feel confident that you're on your trajectory. If you're at 11 o'clock and you're caught up, and you've got everything that you set out to get caught up by 11 o'clock, then you can feel good, because, okay, even though I'm not done yet, I've got 4 hours worth of work left to do. I know that I'm right on track, and I'm going to be good. If you don't put any benchmarks in there, and you don't measure it out, and you don't know where you're at 11 o'clock, you don't know if you're on track or not. You're just kind of working and seeing what happens. You're just kind of leaving your results up to chance. But as long as you're benchmarking, you know where you're at, you know when you're on time, and that gives us a great feeling of reassurance. It gives us more confidence to know where we're at. So anyway, that's the compartmentalization part of it. I'm sure you guys can relate to that some. The third part of benchmarking then also is measuring results. So it's not enough just to have those in place, just to have those benchmarks in place. It's also important that we measure them, that we track our progress, or have some kind of a scorecard, so to speak, so that we can keep our awareness up. And so that's really important. So at the beginning of the year this year, I really got serious about taking care of my health. And so I created a spreadsheet that was really good. It helped me track my blood sugar levels for being diabetic. It helped me track the amount of time I was working out every day. It helped me track my weight, so I would weigh myself every day. And so every day I got into a routine of measuring my results and knowing where I'm at. Also tracking my food, so I knew how many carbs was going into my body. And so I did that. I did that for a time because I wasn't in a good habit of doing those things. I wasn't very good at kind of benchmarking, and now I've cut out a lot of those things that I track, because it's habit now. I'm doing them, and I don't have to track them quite as much. But measuring is really important, especially when you're trying to develop a habit. But anyway, measurement is really important. So measuring results keeps you aware of your current progress to avoid progress drift. Progress drift is when you stop measuring things and you just go on and you do things as they come natural or whatever. And it's kind of like a boat. When you have a boat out on the lake and you pull up the anchor and you just float. After a while, it might float away slowly and you don't even know how far you've drifted. You might look up and you've drifted, a half a mile down the coast and not even know it because it doesn't feel any different. What's the same thing with us? Unless we're measuring it, that measurement is basically, it's a little glimpse into truth that is our anchor, and truth has to be our anchor with this. We have to really be honest with ourselves of where we're at and what we're really doing. So, a scorecard keeps the expected results front and center, and it helps us stay focused. And that's why an anchor helps you do that with a boat. You put an anchor down and you can kind of see where you're at. If you're keeping track of things periodically, then you always know where you're at and you always know where you're going. For instance, maybe tracking your labor every day so that you know where you're at for the week. Am I plus or minus on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday? And so where am I at for the week? Am I over on hours or am I under on hours? And that's kind of the benchmarking goes along. If you kind of track where you're going each day, you make a different benchmark for your weekly goals, then you'll know where you're at and it won't get away from you. I've seen managers time and time again just not pay attention to labor for the whole week. They just work and kind of leave things up to chance. They're not benchmarking. And at the end of the week, they're over 40 hours. They don't even know where it went because they weren't benchmarking. They weren't paying attention to those stops. They weren't paying attention to their labor each day to know where they're at. Does that make sense? And that's a form of benchmarking too. So measuring is really, really important. If you don't measure, you don't know where you're at, and you're going to mess up the whole system if we do that. All right. And the last section here for benchmarking is discipline. And daily intentional focus to create a new normal. Okay. And we'll talk about the new normal a little bit more when we in the future here when we talk about production. But the new normal is really what it is it's your natural pace that you work at. It's the pace that you feel comfortable at. It's the level of efficiency that you feel that you've been acclimated to. And sometimes that's a very healthy level, and sometimes it's not a very healthy level. And so, but discipline or daily intentional focus, that's when we set aside time every day to proactively kind of get your mind focused on your benchmarks. Like in the morning, when I start my day, that's the first thing that I do is I sit down and I look at what I would need to accomplish throughout the course of the day, and I figure out what my big rocks are and what they need to do. So I think through those things and I pace them out so that I know when I'm going to be done. And my goal is to get done as soon as I can, to get it all done as fast as I can. And so, but you have to have that focus time up front to be able to get through that. And then also just to have the mentality that each step is a baby step, that you don't have to solve the whole problem in one day. If you come in at 8 o'clock, you've got 7 hours until you hit your finish line. So you don't need to try to, you don't need to freak out and try to figure out how to get it all done at 1 o'clock. But you do need to stay on task and stay on your benchmark so that you know when you'll get done. And that's what the benchmarks does. It gives you that assurance. If you don't have benchmarks, sometimes people will just really try to accomplish everything. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody maybe that gets motivated to lose weight. They're like, I'm going to lose 75 pounds. And so they just go off the deep end. They're running and they're this extreme exercise, and they're eating no carbs, and they're just doing this like they're going to, lose 70 pounds in a month. And it's not a healthy way to think. It's a very extreme way to think. And what we really need to do is we need to figure out the trajectory that's going to get us there in the right at the right level. Don't try to do 7 hours of work in 2 hours. You'll just burn yourself out. But you can push yourself and try to get 7 hours of work done within 6 hours if you can, and try to hit each one of those benchmarks. You can do that, and that's sustainable. That's something that's sustainable, and it's healthy. It's a healthy way to think when it comes to accomplishing things. We also need to keep in mind that success isn't the completion of a long-term goal. Success is being on the right trajectory that will automatically lead you towards your long-term goal. And so for instance, if you've got 3 hours and you want to make 300 heart-shaped pizzas, you know that you can do 100 pizzas per hour and you'll hit it. And so that would be 50 pizzas every 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, you can measure yourself. Am I at 50 pizzas? Did I hit 50 pizzas this first 30 minutes? If you did, maybe you're at 55. Now you know you're a little bit ahead of schedule. And so now you know you're on pace. And that means you're already successful because you're already doing what you need to do. You just need to keep going and do what you're already doing because you're already on the trajectory. Success is when you're on the right track. Success isn't just like at the end when you get there. So the reason why it's important to think that way is so that you don't, get through the first half an hour, get your 50 pizzas done and think to yourself, oh man, we're not even close. We're just so far away. We got 300 to do it. And we've only got 50. You can get bent out of shape if you don't know where you're at on the process. But as long as you know where you're at, then you can feel secure that, hey, I'm on track. I'm already successful because I'm right on target. But if you don't measure it, you'll never know. All right. So that is benchmarking. I want to go ahead and open it up to questions and discussion for you guys. So